Hello, Arvida Nation.
Hello.
My name is Nizar Ajanovic. I'm here with the wonderful Ismet, and we'll get into how to pronounce his name here in a second. He's a Bosnian author, screenwriter. I'll get more into your biography later. The book that we'll be discussing is his newest work of autofiction, Unspeakable Home. We'll get into the genre of autofiction as well as some of the themes covered in the book. But I really like your idea of starting with your last name because there is something about changing your identity because people can't pronounce it when you come to America. So is it originally it's what?
Originally, it's Prcic,
Prcic.
and nobody can say that in United States. So when I was in Portland, my ex-wife made me go take a comedy class, and I built this whole thing about my name because most Americans, when you hear Ismet, Ismet, they say it with the Z sound. They say Ismet, which means excrement in Bosnian. And then Persic, actually PRC as a root of the word is like kind of to well, we can't curse, but the F word. But it means also to kind of mess with somebody to, and then also to do it. So like I was joking, like, my name in literal translation means a terrible effer or crappy effer.
Crappy, yeah.
So yeah, I just go by Izzy and I say Persic
Persic,
because it's just easier for Americans to say.
yeah. I mean, for me, Ajanovic doesn't take too much creativity to figure out what to do with that. But yeah, I grew up with that stigma in my whole life as well. I wanted to start maybe then with coming to a new place, how it transmutes you, how you change your identity, how you are no longer maybe a fixed symbol to yourself. What I kind of got from your book and your writing in general is that perhaps you're never a fixed signifier, and coming to America either exacerbated that or it was just a continuation of what was going on in the former Yugoslavia anyway. But in my copy of the book, you signed it, "We're all heroes of our own bullshit."
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. And I think there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, I don't think you paint yourself as a hero in this book. And I love the irony of that. And then second of all, of your own bullshit, meaning like of your own inventions, right?
Yeah.
So how much did you have to reinvent yourself in this book? And how much of it do you think it's still you?
Oh my God, that's a loaded question, and a lot of it. But like, what it was for me is like I was an introverted child, and in Bosnia, when you grow up and you're introverted, you're kind of like a black sheep of the family, and but coming to America at 18, uh, and not having any emotional support. I had an uncle, but he was more, he was uber American, and he was like telling me to change my name to Matt because his name is Mehmed and he goes by Mike. And So it's kind of hilarious that like immediately I had to come in and put on a persona, and then because I was in theater, I realized I was like, oh, maybe I can just like pretend. I can just create a character who is outgoing, somebody who is not introverted, who will be able to survive in the environments, in the new environments. So I put on this hard. I remember I bought this red jacket. Actually, somebody gave me this red jacket, and I was like very shy, and I didn't like hang out with anybody. And then and somebody put that jacket on me, and we were in San Francisco somewhere, and they pushed me into a room, and that jacket kind of changed me, and I started going like, oh, and then he was like, you should go by Izzy because that's a rock and roll name. So I was like, this is it, persona. I have a red jacket on, I have a mohawk, this is who I am. And then I was just like Jim Carrey. I would just eat the scenery. I was the loudest one, drank the most. I was the like everybody's best friend. But what happens is it takes a toll. And then everybody meets you as this garrulous, everybody's best friend. And then when it's time for you to feel sad, to feel down, to they go like, hey, what happened to you? Where's that guy? And so after a while, it became a curse, really, and it made me feel more alone. And so I ended up kind of burning the candle at both ends because I would get up really early before everybody so I can be by myself and be in my own, and write. And then, my life would come in and I would just become this easy guy and run around and do things. And then and at some point, like drink everybody under the table, and then sit there by myself again, writing and thinking things, and then sleep maybe 2-3 hours a night and do it all over again. And then 20 years of that, of course, takes a toll.
Yeah.
And then you are, you you go like, why am I doing this, guy?
Yeah.
I don't want to do this guy anymore.
So you're living like a fiction of yourself.
Yeah.
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 Well,
Or you're living a life for somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah.
you are asking for approval from outside.
Yeah.
And then when you are by yourself, there's nobody there to take care of you, kind of thing.
Yeah, you're like Andy Kaufman with an Andrew Dice Clay jacket.
Yeah.
And then, but for something like this, do you feel like I've figured out how to ask the question. Do you feel like writing through the moniker of fiction, even though it's autofiction, gives you more freedom to express yourself? Or do you think that, like you're saying, like that fiction is just a character that people expect?
In Bosnia, we don't even have a distinction between nonfiction and fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a kid, all the books had the same cover, and it had the title and the name of the person, and you had to get 50 pages into it to find out what the book is about. If it's for you, there's no commercials on the back. There's nobody's going like, oh, trigger warning, this is about this.
Yeah.
So you just kind of had to dive into it to see if you want to finish it.
Yeah.
And nobody cared whether something's fiction or not. And over here, there's a clear distinction. And then when my first book came out, I remember people kept asking me, how much of this is true? And I would go, every time I would give them a different number.
Yeah.
I'd be like 13.5%, 18.25%. And like just randomly, because it is ridiculous to claim that something is pure fiction or pure nonfiction.
Right.
Everything is filtered through our, stupid brains, through our childhoods, what we've read, and then also how we want to show up. How we want to, like, what is our style, sexiness of our prose, blah 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 blah. All of this, and then to claim that something is nonfiction or fiction, it's ridiculous. It's just like one person's take on life. And so, yes, I went to UCI over here in Orange County, and a lot of my fellow writers in a workshop, they were advocating for pure fiction, in which you invent Jessica Donovan, and you have to invent where she lives and what her garage looks like, and all of this stuff, and what kind of car. Or if this character is Mexican, I have to go into Mexican culture and figure out all of this stuff and blah blah blah. And I just never had any interest in that, because I have problems in my own life, and fiction is the way for me to kind of go into my own life experience and kind of chronicle what I've learned, and kind of tell the story of myself to myself. So I've never invented a house. Like, I never wrote a fictional house in my life. I always go like, oh, that's my aunt's house. And I just do it. And I know exactly what it looks like. And I don't have to invent anything.
I feel like it's a lot ballsier to do it that way, but you're also risking a lot, right? You're kind of risking your reputation in a way.
Yeah. But also, like, I have that kind of punk rock streak.
Yeah.
I think, I was a black sheep of the family for a long time, and I don't give a crap.
Yeah.
So, I kind of know that if you have an artist or a writer in a family, it's probably a bad thing for the family, because all the dirty secrets are going to come out.
Yeah.
But it's necessary for them to come out. There's no healing when you scoop things under the rug.
Yeah.
And if you think about trauma and transgenerational trauma, all of that happens because people come from Vietnam and they can't talk about what they've seen, and the kids don't know why the father is so angry or why the mother is whatever. And also, there's a trauma that, let's say, like alcoholism. You can have a alcoholic grandfather, and then the kids see the father, so they do not get it. But they don't tell the kids that the father was an alcoholic, and the kids have no clue, and they go to college and start drinking tequila, and they're like, I can drink everybody under the table. This is nothing. And then, like 20 years later, you're in trouble, or 10, or whatever, 2, depending on your constitution.
Right. No, I mean, so I think there's almost something like you can afford yourself a bit of suspension of disbelief if you write like in second person, right? But it can be the most messed up thing ever, but as long as it's not in the I voice. Yeah,
I find it interesting. I like to, in all of my books, I have chapters written from, first person, second person, and third person, because it allows me, if it's something is really traumatic, if I write it in the third person, I can distance myself from it.
Mm-hmm.
If I write in the first person, it's more like it's my own inner monologue kind of thing. But when I write second person, it's like, this is when I want the reader to really feel what it's like to viscerally, what it's like to be in a character. It's almost like playing a first person shooter.
Yeah, you're in the eye. Yeah.
And so, but you have to kind of write it very, you have to kind of lead the reader into the book and into the character. So when you slip into the second person and then kind of describe everything very with nuance,
Yeah.
and kind of lead from moment to moment, so that the person can really feel like they're in the body walking around. And then when I say you do this, you do that, it doesn't feel jarring for them, but it's
Right.
actually, it makes you feel more than if you just hear from, a lot of times, like, people, when they say Autofiction, they believe, oh, it's kind of like a memoir.
Yeah.
And it's a safe thing because, oh, of course, this person went through this terrible thing, but they survived. Here they are. They wrote a book. They're all good, So
Right.
it's okay for me to read this because it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And like, that's what I did in my first book. That, that's why the main character is Ismet and all this stuff. And then when stuff happens at the end, they're like, what? I thought he was that's what you thought, but this is fiction. So you can play with the reader, and hopefully they can kind of feel the trauma from within, because being an immigrant, and thinking in two languages, and then being from two cultures, two religions, all of this stuff, a lot of times people just kind of say immigrant, and they kind of put people in a box, like all immigrants over here.
Yeah.
And it's not true. Actually, the immigrant stories that get famous are the success stories. There's plenty of immigrants who died in some corner, in Tustin on the street, and nobody knows about them.
No, I mean, absolutely. When a lot of this book, Unspeakable Home, is about being broken and also being unable to create a narrative that's purely cohesive if you're not a cohesive person. I feel like a lot of the problem with this, like, model minority narrative, is that they have to have model narratives. And
Yes.
I know for people like us, from Bosnia, we're simply just not. We don't. I don't want to make a claim as to whether or not we're model minorities, but we don't have model narratives. That's for sure. It's very hard to articulate. As I saw a really funny YouTube video explaining the Bosnian War, and it opened with like, you're going to need like a PhD in physics to like understand this. It's overly complex, even for us. And then to try to translate all that to an audience, it's impossible. So I think the most honest way to do it is kind of the way that you write in your book, which is very viscerally, which is to put us in the chaos, to be like, look, this is as disjointed as it is because that's what it is. Yeah. And
it's important for me to talk about trauma and not use the language of trauma, because a lot of times people immediately go, oh, that's whatever. This is, post-traumatic stress disorder. This is narcissistic abuse. This is all of these. And then it gets bogged down in that. I wanted to kind of lead the reader so they feel viscerally what it feels like to come over here, and then you go to the store and you see your neighbor from Bosnia who's not there, but you see it in some other person,
someone's face, right?
And then suddenly you're thinking Bosnian thoughts. You're suddenly next to this train, and you're suddenly in another world. And so I wanted to kind of capture that, so that when reader goes, oh, this is how it feels like, for the immigrants to walk around and see a familiar face, and then zone out, or go into a dissociative state. Anyway, so that's
I mean, there's like a lot of, I think, pathologizing about trauma, and that language, I think, while it has its place, I think for literature can be very limiting. And really there's this whole phenomenology of having that depth of trauma, which creates very psychedelic ways of thinking. And I think you really capture, like, the absolute way that the mind can be transient, the soul can be transient, despite of where you might be living. How did you pitch that? Because I think even the ideas, I'm trying to recount it here, and I've read the book, is very difficult for me to articulate it, but trying to sell that on top of that, I'm being serious. Like, what editor looked at it and I was like, okay, I get this, I get the vision here.
Well, there was no pitching. So with the second book, like, writing the first book, it took me like 9 years to write, seven to write, 2 to edit, and then 2 to publish. And so after that, I was like, oh my God, if it takes this long to write one book and get it out, I don't want to do this anymore. So I was like, I'm going to write a collection of short stories.
Mhm.
And so I started writing this book as a collection of short stories, which is why all the people are, kind of me, but not me,
Mhm.
so they're all kind of artists, but, one of them is illustrator, one of them is a, writer, so they're all kind of different. But at some point, in there, the short stories that I wrote, they all kind of collapsed.
Mhm.
They would go a certain way, and then there would be like a weird ending that like nobody liked. They kind of liked it, but they were like, oh, that's kind of meta ending. That's
Mhm.
kind of rock and roll ending. It's almost like a exercise. So nobody really wanted it, and I got disillusioned. I was like, all right, I'm going to throw it away. And it wasn't until I went online and I found out that there was a paper written about my first book, Shards.
Mhm.
And there's 2 creation scientists, psychologists, I think, who wrote a paper in which they looked at shards and they diagnosed the narrator with post-traumatic stress disorder
Oh,
based
wow.
on what was happening in the book. So they went in, and the title of the thing was called A Secret Narrator in Ismet Prcic's Shards, right?
Is this who you read a letter to in the
Yes,
book?
yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when that happened, I realized, oh my God, I finally found one reader that understood everything that I was trying to do.
Yeah.
They diagnosed PTSD from the events of the book and not from me talking about it as a, PTSD.
Right.
And, but they said there's a secret narrator in the book. And so they break it down and it's like, okay, so there's this Ismet character, and then he becomes Izzy when he comes to America.
Yeah.
And he has this persona. And there's this Mustafa character who's like stays in Bosnia to fight. But then they start having each other's dreams and each other's memories. And then by the end, you have no clue which one of them is real. Is the Mustafa guy dreaming of the future in America, or is the guy in Izzy in America? Is he does he feel like a survival guilt, and he's living through the stories that he's hearing about fighting? But then they argue that there's a third narrator, and they pull out certain things from the book, certain passages, and truly I just looked at it and I was like, and it was just like these whole paragraphs. I was like, yeah, I don't know who is writing this.
Oh,
And they are like, this is trauma writing itself.
wow.
And
Okay.
when I heard that, I realized, okay, I think I know what I'm doing with this book.
Yeah.
And then when I went back to the short stories, I also realized that there were all kinds of references to vaginas and weird sex stuff. None of the stuff that happened to me,
Yeah.
but they were in there as if I was writing about my own life.
Uh-huh.
And then I realized that there was like a trauma that happened way earlier in my life that I needed to address, which then gave me impetus to take the short stories and then glue them together in such a way that explores that, because it was already written it was already in the language, and I was not even aware of it.
Mhm,
And only on the subsequent reading, after I found out that trauma speaks for itself, I found it in my own writing.
Got it.
And then I went and edited to bring that up. So when that shows up in the book, it feels organic and good.
You kind of became a conduit for trauma to kind of
Yeah,
articulate
yeah.
itself through there.
And also, like, I don't have insurance, I don't have a therapist, I don't have any of this stuff. So my way of seriously, like, I really write for therapy and
Yeah.
a little bit for vendetta. Like going back in my life and going like, oh, like, you have a perfect thing to say to
Yeah.
somebody when, and then you go back and you rewrite the story. So you're a hero. That's why
That's
I
the
say
hero
we're
part.
heroes. of our
Yeah,
own
yeah,
bullshit.
exactly. You find the perfect
Yeah,
comeback
exactly.
30 years
Not
later.
all the time, because you don't want to make it contrived.
Right,
but,
right.
But still, you feel a little bit better.
I mean,
about yourself.
I think, I think you're very honest about your self-portrayal. I think it's really rough. you know, a lot
Yeah,
of it.
it's-
There's one part in particular. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but is where who's the guy who's calling you a Nimrod? Your boss.
Oh yeah, my
right?
boss.
Yeah, and he's like calling you out for not staying in the war.
Hmm.
I mean, I feel like that's a very vulnerable thing to admit, because I think there's tons of young
Oh
men
yeah.
who had that experience. Even people too young to have been in the war, like myself, have that guilt.
Yeah.
Where I didn't do
Oh, yeah.
enough. I was like 3, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know, like what gives you the impetus to put it in there?
Because you have to. I mean, you have one life, and like
Yeah.
whatever you experience is what you experience. Like I was invited to St. Louis because there's a huge Bosnian community there,
Yeah.
and they have a Bosnian memory project there, right?
Yeah.
And you show up, and they have a microphone, and you sit down and you tell your story. And I felt really guilty because nothing really happened to me. I got
Yeah.
out. I didn't really fight. You know, I kind of survived the siege, but you know that's still nothing compared to like people who lost family members who, you know. And then all the people who were working there, they're like, no, 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 we want everybody's experience of war, even if
Right.
you didn't feel it, whatever it is, everybody's experience of it, because all of them are you know, unique and important.
Yeah.
And so it's not, you know, it's kind of like going to AA meetings, and
Yeah.
then there's somebody going like, oh, you think that's tough, you know, I did this, blah, you know, and it becomes like who's the better drunk,
Right.
you know.
Right,
and
right.
that's not the point of this. The point is to capture, you know, your particular you know, your particular view of the world, no matter what it is. So warts and all, and if you didn't do something, you didn't do it. If you
Yeah.
did, you did.
Yeah.
There's nothing. What can you do about it?
Yeah, you can't help that you're not the model refugee.
Yeah.
In terms of relating though to diaspora, people from Bosnia that came either before the war, right before the war, during the war, after the war, do you find like a relationality there? Like, do you think like in terms of your experiences, life experiences, you can relate? Not really, right?
Not really. I haven't like met a lot of Bosnians here, because I only had my uncle here, and then when I left my uncle, I just immediately went to college and then started hanging out with Americans, and that was it.
And Southern California does not have a lot of Bosnians. I
Yeah,
feel like,
that's true.
yeah, like LA maybe a little bit, but
Yeah.
yeah, generally we're pretty divorced from that here. But you do feel, I feel like camaraderie with comedians, American
Yeah,
comedians.
yeah.
Bill Burr. So a lot of the book is addressed to Bill Burr. There's maybe like 5 letters to Bill, or maybe
10.
10. There's a ton of them.
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah. No, and they're very funny. 2 questions about Bill Burr. One, what about him in particular resonates with you? Like, because there's so many comic voices in America. And then 2, have you actually tried to reach out to?
Oh yes, of course I did.
Okay, tell me about that.
So Bill Burr, like I was going through. I was trying to get clean from booze. I got divorced. My life exploded, and I lived in Salem, Oregon, and which is a terrible place. But and I really thought I was gonna die,
Yeah.
and so I was just like, I'm gonna go into this tiny little, and then kind of live the rest of my life. And then and I was going through, like, I couldn't walk. I was just laying there. I had hepatitis, and I was just laying there, just kind of pretty much dying.
Mm.
And at some point, like, there was a moment where I was like, I have to stop drinking, but I didn't know how to.
Mhm.
And then I just told myself, I'm just gonna try to die. I'm not gonna take my medicine. I'm not gonna drink water. I'm not gonna eat. I'm just gonna lay here. I'm gonna lay in the position of a dead person, and I'm just gonna lay there, and I'm gonna see what happens. And so, when I tell the story, I say 5 days, but probably not. But I just lay there, going in and out of consciousness, and not moving until one time I woke up and I wanted some water, and then there was the best glass of water I ever had, and then I drank a can of chicken soup, and that was the best chicken soup I've ever had. And then slowly built myself. I'm sorry, I started telling the story, but like, what is the question again?
Oh my God, if I can remember this thread myself.
Bill Burr.
Bill
Yeah,
Burr.
yeah. So in the midst of this, I stopped drinking, and it feels like it was not like it was not a decision.
Yeah.
It's almost like somebody just took it away from me, and
Yeah.
I was not interested in it anymore. And the Netflix was on all the time, and one of his things was on the thing, and he was really funny, and also like he was struggling with alcoholism, and he also had sexual trauma when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And I did this deep dive online, and I found him doing the Moth Radio Hour,
Mhm,
and he
yeah.
was talking about, and he was not allowed to joke, so he just came in and told the story about what happened to him, and just to see him kind of like his constricted voice, just uncomfortable, just getting this out, completely uncomfortable, and I was like, oh, there's this is what's hidden with the humor.
Yeah.
This is like the real human being, and then this is hidden by all this boozing and being funny, and then he also talks about like being funny so that you can feel comfortable, so that that people will not look at you as a threat, and people are not going to mess with you because you're sharp tongued. So in a way, it's a little costume or a mask that you put against the world, and like that's what I did too. I always wanted to be funny, but like I never knew English that well. And even when I first got to the United States, like my favorite thing was like late night TV, because I was trying to learn the idioms of the language, and then you would hear like somebody bought the farm, and I'm like, oh, how nice for them, and then later on find out, oh, that means dying. Oh, that's a completely different. Hey, buddy, how you doing? We have a doggy here. And so so yeah, it's perfect to learn the language and the nuances of the language. Comedy.
But what was it, Bill specifically? Because he's blue collar, because of the relationality with the trauma?
No, maybe because I was just like, I was divorced and feeling all these things, and he's talking all kinds of crap. And I'm like just feeling like, oh, he was like building me up a little bit. So I don't know.
I feel like there's certain cultures that like use life as fuel for art, and I feel like Bosnians use art as fuel for life, and I think the chosen medium for us is humor. I think we analyze everything through humor. I mean, there's very dark jokes from the war, during the war, after the war, and I think it's something hard for maybe some people and cultures to really relate to. But I feel like humor is something that is very near and dear, and comedians, especially American stand-ups, I think speak in our vernacular. I think the way Bosnians speak to each other is very similar to the way a stand-up speaks to a crowd.
We trash each other.
Trashing each other.
Trash each other. Your grandma trashes you. Everybody does. So it's like it's totally like it feels like love.
It feels like love. You're like, oh, you're my people.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I know.
You can take a joke. That's the best thing.
It's the best thing
as a Bosnian.
I mean,
take a joke.
It's kind of like a rite of passage. You get roasted, and then if you don't lose your cool, you're okay. You're one of us. You can hang out now and stuff like that. Do you think that level of honesty is hard for American audiences or readers, perhaps?
I'm finding out that it might be perhaps in this new era that people kind of want to know ahead of time if you're going to talk about suicide, if you're going to talk about rape, if you want to talk about anything, and like I said, in Bosnia before, you read a book, you don't know what's going to happen in it, and you kind of judge the book based on how it made you feel. If it made you feel angry, if it made you laugh, if it made you throw the book across, that's a good book if you toss it across the room a couple of times. But here it's like, oh, it's almost like nowadays, like the reader kind of goes to the author. I will read you if you do not make me feel stupid. If you do not make me look up a word that I don't already know. If you take me to a place that I don't know anything about, and you don't hold my hand. And or if you don't have a moral compass through which I can see the world. It's like, no, this is modern literature.
Milan
anything happen.
Kundera wrote like, I think that the reader's obsession with moralizing the characters is because they're discomfortable with uncertainty. And really, like, I think we should approach a book understanding it might be completely uncertain. And a lot of like literary analysis of a book like Lolita, for instance, I think is a lot of like coping with he was positively anti-pedophilia. He was positively this, but I think that the real challenge of great literature is there is no answer. It's just kind of giving you life is deeply uncertain, and that's what you have to contend with. And if you need someone to give you the comfort food or something, maybe movies are better or something.
Exactly. The book is a safe place, and if you think about it, it exists in the mind of the writer,
Yeah.
and then it's transcribed into these symbols, and then
Yeah.
every new person has to, reinterpret the symbols and then recreate it in their own mind.
Yeah.
And every book is different in the mind. So, and it's a safe place. This is where you can be as evil as you want to be, as good as you want to be.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
can, because it's a safe place. You're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
dealing with ideas, and you're not doing it in real life. And
Yeah.
people now go, it's like, oh, you said it, therefore
Yeah.
you are like that. And
Right.
that's not true. Just because I'm writing about something does not mean I'm just like exercising my demons.
Yes.
In
yeah.
a healthy way.
In a healthy way.
You know?
Yeah. We have a question from the
question?
audience.
It's actually from.
Oh, okay, from chat.
Yeah, it's from.
Oh, nice.
She wants to know what you think about trigger warnings.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question for you.
Well, I don't need them. But like I understand, I understand if if the culture changes, and then we need that for people's safety. And but I think a lot of a lot of good experiences get lost because we are warned of what to expect. Because sometimes you don't know, just because, like, let's say, I was sexually assaulted when I was a kid, but like I don't let that. It's not that I'm strong. It's not like strong. Like I don't mind encountering it in literature or in films, even though it creates that little oscillation
Right,
and
right.
discomfort. It makes me feel real in the world. Like this happens. I'm one of these people,
Yeah.
and this is a normal. It's not a normal thing to be traumatized. I mean, it is. This is how we learn. I mean,
Yes.
everything that human beings learn, we learn through trauma.
Yeah.
Things are this way, and then suddenly it changes,
Right.
and then we're like, oh, how do we cope with that? And then we change. So we have something has to happen to us for us to change. Rarely do we just read a book and be like, oh, I guess I'm not going to go to Chile ever. I don't know. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers the question.
And can you just repeat that the question was about trigger warnings?
The question from Barbara in chat was, what does Ismet think about trigger warnings?
Yeah.
And I feel like if you don't provide a trigger warning, you're accused of co-signing the trauma.
Yeah.
As though you morally.
Yeah.
There's a suggestion that you agree with the harm being caused, but
yeah,
but
but
I'm saying that's how people are framing it. That's not what I
understand.
That's really not what I think.
Yeah.
I think, and I just offer maybe one more perspective on trigger warnings. I think that things that we would never think need trigger warnings are perhaps the most devastating, decentering things. And I think it's kind of ambiguous, like something that's a part of life we have to put a warning on. But like when I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey, I mean, I couldn't function for decades, like that messed me up deeply existentially. No one would suggest put a trigger warning on that.
Yeah.
So I think that we can't possibly know all the ways that people can be decentered and
I'm probably not a person to ask about trigger warnings because I grew up in Eastern European theater, and the slaps are real. Fights are real. If you have music on, somebody has to play it on stage.
Yeah.
And like everything is in your face. You jump into the audience. So making, it's kind of punk rock, like making shit happen.
Yeah.
And like poking people is the way to get them to think.
Right.
So I don't know. There's probably a little bit of that in all of my books. A little bit of that, like Arrested Development. I'm 47 years old, but I'm like still thinking like an 18-year-old, going like, yeah, let's fuck shit up.
No, there's it's I forgot who said it, but I think literature is a good space to express those things.
Yeah.
And I do personally feel like there is a degree to which the aesthetic intensity of something is devalued if you provide a warning, if you give an insight that it's going to happen before it happens.
And also, like, when you see, this is the thing, when you write fiction and you put that stuff in, then it's a choice, and you say, oh, this person did this, and so you're an architect of a, let's say, a sexual assault in a fictional one. But if you're writing about your own, I don't need a trigger warning for that. But I understand that other people might need it to be, oh, this is a book about this, which is why it's on the back of the thing. All of the stuff that this book deals with, it's advertised.
Yeah, I think the
that
book.
cover.
You even look at the cover. It's pretty.
Oh yeah.
Unambiguous. It's going to be a
Yeah, it's
raucous
a
read.
it's a downer. It's going down, and house is upside down, and he's a stump with
Yeah.
hands and broken.
Actually, to that, if you don't mind reading that section now
Oh,
that
sure.
I've outlined, because there's a quote at the beginning of the book. You quote Beckett, and then you quote yourself, and you quote yourself saying, "What about the dude is broken? Don't you get?" And I think that's important to understand. Is like at a certain point, it's like this is really the raw intensity of what's being expressed here. And I think this section, you frame it for the reader.
Oh God. So this is towards the end of the book, and most of the book is these chapters, and they kind of read like short stories or chapters, and there's these letters that glue them all together. But the last part of the book, it's kind of this like a, I don't even know, purge,
Yeah.
I guess.
Oh, it starts to almost break down the language.
Yeah,
almost
it breaks
starts to
down the
break
language. It
Yeah.
breaks down. It broke me down when I wrote it.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, like I said before, like I wanted to show the viscerally what it feels like to go through this.
Yeah.
So Izzy in this part is writing this last part, and then out of nowhere he loses a month of his life because he had a breakdown, but we don't know that until we start reading this part here. This page break has been brought to you courtesy of a mental breakdown. In my snort real life, I'd made a plan to visit a poet friend of mine in Portland. I woke up on time, packed a lunch, and even brought a piss jar just in case, went out into the Prius and found the battery dead. I sat there, depressing start, like I was stuck on an elevator, sobbing. How the fuck? Because just yesterday, I'd driven over to South Salem to buy a used video game console from my youth as a present to myself. But no, it wasn't yesterday at all. That was a month ago. I lost a month this time. When I came back to myself, to these pages, it was all there in the document. The evidence of what I'd predicted was going to happen in the first paragraph of the storming patrol. I fucking called it. When the narrative crust fissures, all the chips fall where they may, I said. This will undoubtedly crack me right the fuck open, I said. Well, the crust fissured all right, all over the document. Above, on the very page, right on this very page, right below the place where I broke it and decided to interject this jackass indented interlude, I found 33 pages of notes and false starts, all the chips of my narrative, all the dandruff. Something in there caused my break with reality. And before I go through the detritus to try and distill it, I have to put down the following little epiphany that occurred to me and just leave it right here. Here's the thing. I've written about the events from my life as well as my in-brain existence even before this effort. The manuscript I wrote was in want of a definitive shape, so I asked for help. It was in Gil Dennis's class. When asked to share my greatest shame and fear and joy, having heard other participants spill real guts, one shared about giving up a kid for adoption just 2 decades later received news from the agency that the kid became a victim of an unconscionable crime. I shared a share of my shames in those pages and fears and joys to be sure, but not the greatest, it turns out. At the time, I swear to God, I was convinced that I was exposing it all, unringing my soul, deep elbowing ardent knots of trauma, releasing healing toxins. And the result was a manuscript that, when I gave it to Beloved, she read with deep trepidation and couldn't stomach the ending. Why do you have to go so dark, so mercilessly into ambiguity? Why do we die, you mean? There he goes. Fuck you. The trick is to imagine the worst possible outcome. Make it as alive in you as you can make it, flesh it out, and make peace with every last goddamn little detail of it. Then whatever actually happens, dreams are like this also. Our subconsciousness scouring the wealth of ancient lessons buried in the DNA, devising scenarios to prep us for what might happen. You just love that, don't you? Fucking A. My little hack? Yeah, what else do I have? Dreaming your life away. Who isn't? Aren't you dreaming a life with a sunnier me or sunnier anyone? Nah. You don't turn that on me. No, with you, it's like you're praying. like you're wishing for it. What's the alternative? Praying against it? Be careful what you wish for. I wish you'd see me as I am. But perhaps she did. Perhaps she read what I wrote and saw me exactly as I am and ran for the hills for exactly that reason. Because I'm broken. Or worse, because I'm unabashed about my brokenness and willing to extrapolate and follow the pattern to the inevitable conclusion, chronicling every broken move I make, predicting them even, dreaming up a groove for a broken life into which I'm allowing my reality to flow, dragging her in tow, she fears. It's not lost on me that a lot of what happens in that manuscript has already been happening to me in real life. The tragedy of all of this is that all those new agers are right. You can manifest whatever you wish for. The problem is that some of us are broken. We came from the broken or we were broken by the broken. And because of that, we wish the worst for ourselves. We wish, which is what we end up manifesting in the world at large. Brokenness. Brokenness, neither bad, just brokenness, nor good, just the lust, a given. For we were broken back in heaven when we knew just not brokenness. Then just the lust to break from heaven, to break, be broke, and a lust to know how shit works for real, with no apparatus to handle for real, just this roiling shit of life that soils real hands, souls, ovaries, testicles in the process, in-betweeneries, in-betweenticles. Broken, brokener, brokenest is in the cards for all of us. So do break bread and into laughter. Crack a slime. Lie, you broken piece of shit. It's fiction. Lie, you douche. Tell these pages you're okay. Go ahead. Tell yourself you're okay. Okay, easy. You're okay. There you go. But let me guess. This is not allowed, going nuts like this mid-story, just cutting and pasting from the hodgepodge of notes, writings. God forbid letting the broken write from within the brokenness. No, to be heard, the broken, we have to present ourselves as whole, pretend that we are put together. Even if brokenness is the subject, it has to be shown in terms of wholeness, wholeness lost or wholeness gained. The broken have to assure the whole they're really like them to be heard equally. Otherwise, why read the notes from the cracked brain when all that does is show how brittle meaning is, how badly the shards once broken off want to remain broken out of sheer inertia, which is the law of the land, so to speak, and how breaking apart is easier than gluing together, especially when in the mind of this broken one, the latter can only be conceived as breaking of self together or perhaps gluing of self apart. No, let this cracked guy lead you to the mountaintop. This guy who can remember a month of his life, let him put it together for you. Look, he'll even switch back to, and then I switch to a different kind of voice.
Yeah, I mean, what do they want you to figure it all out? You know,
yeah. What do you want to do?
You can't figure your own life out. You know, how are you going to figure the book out? No, I think that's brilliant. I think there's a new space opening in literature, which is like the texture of the subject matter reflects the subject matter. I think this book does it brilliantly. I think I don't know a lot of like books about trauma that speak from the rhythm of trauma. I think they can definitely recount the events, and a lot of people have had even more traumatic lives than you or me or, you know, whatever. Yeah. But they lack the cadence, I think. And I think that's what's brilliant about Unspeakable Home and your writing in general, is that the cadence of that thing is it's going to happen for the reader, whether they want to or not. So yeah, thank you, Ismet, for that brilliance. Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I just tossed it off.
And again, yeah, so the book Unspeakable Home, it's available from Simon & Schuster. I'm amazed that, you know, we're in an era where this kind of like literature can get the audience that it deserves, and that's freaking awesome. One last question I have for you is just, again, hearkening back to comedy. Would you ever embark on a stand-up career?
Like I said, I tried one time. I took one class and I went up there and did like four minutes. And the best joke was there was a woman in front of me who was really short, and she had like, and there was a mic stand, right? And I went up there and I was so scared, and I'm so, you know, mechanically disinclined that I was trying to like, you know, move it, and I just couldn't. And then and as I got frustrated, I just picked up the whole thing like this and did the whole 4 minutes like holding it up, and everyone just laughing at me for not being a dumbass. So there you go. That's my history of stand-up
Those are
comedy.
4
But no, I
minutes
would
of
love to
stand-up.
do it. I would love
Yeah.
to do it at some point. Yeah, because I mean, I was in theater, you know, my whole life, and then I had when I was in junior college in Moore Park College, California. Hey, we had a little comedy troupe, and there were two of them. They were competing. One was called Head Drama,
Uh-huh.
and we were called Closet Thespians. And we did funny things, but
Yeah.
you know in the theater is a kind of like sketch comedy.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Another list.
Top list and
Tough list. Yeah, we have our own sketch comedy from Bosnian. All right, brother. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you. Thanks, man.
Thank you. See, I don't know how to turn this up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Did I exclude chat? Was there questions?
No. I kind of had